Also herzlich willkommen, welcome. Christina and I will be presenting today, next, our accessibility program at Atos to show how we treat accessibility like pollution, inaccessibility like pollution, how we use accessibility as a trigger for innovation, how to link accessibility and digital inclusion to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we'll talk a bit about legislation and share with you what this means for us in daily life. You'll be meeting 3 women of our accessibility leadership team today. My colleague Alexandra Notnagel is on a plane to my hometown and cannot be here today. She is a mid-30s lady with long brown hair wearing a corporate Atos blue business suit and black and white blue French dress. She is our global program manager for accessibility and digital inclusion governance at Atos. And she's got lived experience as a neurodiverse employee. In her own words, being neurodiverse and depending on my environment and people's attitudes, I identify as a person with disability. Inclusive transformation is my passion and profession. In my role, I can support Atos in respecting the slogan of the disability community: nothing about us without us. I am supported to continue in parallel my civil society mandate in the French National Advisory Council for People with Disabilities, in the working group of European and international issues, applications of conventions. Sadly, she cannot be with us today. My name is Beatriz González Mellidez. I'm also known as Bea or just B. And I've been told I am too tall and too white to be a Spaniard, too pale. I wear glasses, I smile, and I usually wear clothes too. I came to Germany for a sabbatical 13 years ago, and now I have 2 half Kartoffel and a half Hamon who are 4 and 1 year old. I work for Atos as head of accessibility and digital inclusion for Central Europe, and I am certified professional in accessibility for web and documents. I'm also a user experience certified requirements engineer, and I participate in several accessibility working groups in the IAAP, which is the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, and the BITCOM, and I lead the German UPA Accessibility Working Group. For me, there is no innovation without co-creation, also with people with different disabilities and backgrounds, and no usability without accessibility. Welcome, Christina.
Welcome, everyone. I am Christina Papadimitriou. I am a blonde with fair-skinned woman in her 40s wearing glasses, and I am located in Athens, Greece. I work as global solution architect with focus on product development, innovation, and patenting in relation to accessibility and inclusion. But in my professional career, I have been working for more than 50 years as software engineer with expertise on HTML, CSS, UX, accessibility, and automation. I'm passionate about innovation and finding solutions, and believe me, accessibility is a field with plenty of room for improvement and thinking out of the box. I can really say that today's innovation accessibility is tomorrow's state-of-the-art technology. I'm also co-organizer and a board member of the Greece meetup. It is a tech community with focus on JavaScript and front-end development, and it is one of the oldest and biggest tech communities in Greece. So let's tap into the program and policy that we have developed for accessibility in Atos. First of all, me and Bea and Alexandra, we are all part of the global accessibility team at Atos. The global governance is led by Neil Milliken, who is the Vice President, Global Head of Accessibility and Digital Inclusion at Atos, and Alexandra, we have already mentioned her. Currently, we have 5 regional accessibility experts who empower us by analyzing and delivering digital accessibility, both internally and externally for our customers. And the intention is to grow more the team. But also the team includes shared functions on the topics of knowledge and skills led by Mark Wilcock, product development driven by me, and communication on accessibility with Antonio Santos acting as our evangelist. Atos, Atos is a multinational information technology and digital transformation firm with more than 109,000 employees in 70 countries, and the headquarters are in Bezons, France. Atos supports the WUD2022 human rights movement to end discrimination. By supporting the WUD2022, we aim to transform the lives of the around 15% of the world's population, or in other words, the estimated 1.3 billion people who live with disabilities. They are considered the world's largest minority, but are they really? Most disabilities are acquired as people age. And thinking again, is it then really a minority considering that everyone could be affected by disability at some point in their life, even if it is a temporary, if it is temporary? So, Atos started its accessibility and inclusion journey almost 20 years ago with its first client contract for the BBC on assistive technology with a team in the UK. We are on the road to realize our mission to become a leader in accessibility and inclusive digital transformation. Atos Accessibility Academy started in 2014 and it goes until today. And for the past 8 years, we have organized large events to celebrate Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which takes place every year the third Thursday, the third week of May on Thursday. Atos was the first CAC 40 company having signed the valuable 500 Charter in 2019. The same year, the first Global Accessibility and Digital Inclusion Policy got signed, which is implemented in all our country offices. We have a dedicated program which started in 2021, and it is supported by regional practices and was awarded last year, at the same year, by Zero Project. We will talk later about it. So let's talk about the Atos Accessibility Program. The Atos Accessibility Program addresses 3 key topics with 7 main work streams. The business growth topic is addressing accessibility offerings to improve revenues of not only Atos clients and business partners, but also ourselves. The second topic, the operational excellence and compliance, relates to our portfolio, internal system and processes focusing on reporting and compliance, procurement, Atos IT, and human resources. The human resources are looking at the topic of inclusive employee experience via cultural change, workplace adjustment, recruitment, progression and retention, as well as learning and development. Our aim is to provide inclusive employee experience from hire to retire. Of course, the transformation does not happen in a silo. That's why we are part of a connected ecosystem to drive this change. We have work streams on accessible external and internal communication, and we have collaborations with social partners like the Valuable 500, the ILO Business Disability Network, WUD2022, our employee resource groups, and different regional NGOs or development agencies like the German GIZ. The global and regional accessibility practices are there to empower, collaborate, and support all the work streams with the end goal to help them deliver on accessibility. The Accessibility and Digital Inclusion Program, as you have heard, is an organizational change program to which the ADCAR change management model can be applied. So the first step for any change is to create awareness and the desire to understand why delivering accessibility is so important, not only for our customer services, but as well as for our own employees. Afterwards, the program will need to be more specific. We need to deliver the training which will allow everyone to gain knowledge, will empower them with the knowledge, adapt the process to have the ability to impact accessibility, and lastly, monitor accessibility in the production so that we can reinforce these new processes. But why do we need to do it? Why should we desire to deliver accessible products and services? In short, because it enables a greater inclusivity for organization, their employees, and their customers. But let's be more specific about it. It ensures compliance with accessibility and non-discrimination laws. Accessibility supports inclusion of an aging workforce as well as employees and customers with disabilities. And by breaking down barriers, it improves employee well-being. And by doing so, it allows to reduce unnecessary absence, enhance efficiency, and all in all, allows to attract and retain diverse talent. That's why Atos has created an accessibility champions network in order to break down all these accessibility barriers, and together in all business areas, we aim to provide equal opportunities to our customers and our employees, as well as delivering accessible products. These champions are not the accessibility professionals. Our accessibility professionals is a team of over 50 people, but the champions are volunteers who get certified to support and foster accessibility in their communities and on their daily business. And it is a constantly growing community. In general, the Accessibility Champions Network is something that started in BBC, and many companies they are trying to develop their own networks. And we are part of a community where we are exchanging knowledge of how we have been achieving and growing this network. So let's talk a bit about our ECG approach. We have a sustainable approach to accessibility within environmental, social, and corporate governance. Accessibility is a social topic, but for it to be successful, a new process to be reinforced, it requires good and strict governance. So accessibility is the essence of the environmental, social, and corporate governance. We strongly believe that environmental and social topics should be addressed jointly to facilitate and boost their implementation and show impact at scale. This allows addressing more UN Sustainable Development Goals at once. We will talk more about the Sustainable Development Goals later on. Now, with Atos corporate social responsibility, we are trying to align corporate programs in regards to purpose, people, planet, and profits. It's the 4P as we call them. Accessibility and diversity, equity, and inclusion programs support people, whereas the decarbonization and sustainability mostly support the planet. However, our programs support profits via business solutions, non-financial reporting, compliance, and employment enablement. Let's talk a bit about our purpose and policy. Atos is a purpose-driven company which supports the digital space being designed secure, sustainable, and accessible to all. Atos Group Policy from 2019 defines that accessibility is the degree to which a product, device, service, physical, digital, or cultural environment is available and usable to as many people as possible. With this, what we want to underline is that accessibility empowers everyone. Our role is to foster the responsible usage of technologies in a way that reinforces and unlocks positive cultural change, reducing exclusion. We move from insertion of people with disabilities to their full inclusion, breaking down technical barriers with inclusive design and assistive technologies and allowing cultural change to actually occur. We aim to build a safe space of collaboration and co-creation with people with disabilities, which will result in the feeling of belonging. We recommend to avoid segregated specific solution, keeping people with disabilities apart, and really aim for mainstreaming inclusion via inclusive design. Our approach to accessibility is to deliver full ecosystem accessibility. Sorry. Based on our experience in tackling climate topics, we are trying to follow the same decarbonization approach at 3 scales to address accessibility issues from all areas of the business environment. First, the direct impact by designing, developing, and delivering accessible and inclusive products and services inside the company and for our customers. Secondly, by indirect impact from purchased products and services that are both accessible. Third but not least, by influencing all the value chain, fostering accessible products, including the sales activities. Now, we will jump to Beatriz, who will take us through the topic of treating inaccessibility like pollution. Bea, back to you.
So, how can we approach accessibility in a sustainable way? Accessibility pioneer Jim Tobias said in 2016, during the Funke Accessibility Days, inaccessibility is kind of like pollution. So the logical extension of this idea is to take frameworks designed to address pollution and apply them to accessibility. Smog is a well-known type of pollution and a negative externality of production processes. Poor accessibility is also a negative externality of the production and planning processes and is as unnecessary as pollution is. But externalities are not all bad. Inclusive design creates many positive externalities. Like on the third picture, that is what we call the curb cut effect. Wheelchairs benefit from this curb cut to go into the pedestrian areas when crossing the streets. But so do families with strollers, people on the bike, and persons with suitcases or shopping carts. How do we bring accessibility, sustainability, and workplace together? I'm going to give you an example of direct impacting processes that we own, like Christina mentioned before. This is our eco-branding. Design elements have been selected to be more sustainable and to minimize our carbon impact via reduced energy consumption on OLEDs and AMOLED screens, and to be accessible in digital dark mode. We now have two user interfaces for all our web, internal and external documents. An accessible decarbonized dark mode for digital use and a light mode for printing. This is achieved via a fixed color palette, audited for contrast again background, and the readable font railway that allows reduction of storage space. This dark mode allows persons with photophobia not to suffer, for example, from migraines while watching the screen. We can turn on the light and we can turn it off. Our default template, like I mentioned, for a screen is dark mode. We are aware that dark mode presents accessibility issues for certain people too, because disability is a complex topic. So the key aspect is that we provide a choice. Any employee can change the template and consume the slides in their preferred mode. We do the same in the web. Our default is black to make a statement on decarbonization, but we always provide the choice to switch and turn on the lights. And we said accessibility is a business. How? For example, within our accessibility as a service offering, we link developments like eco-branding to daily digital workplace experience at enterprise level. I'm showing our corporate PowerPoint templates that can be embedded as a plugin into the PowerPoint navigation bar for all employees. This includes the switch of languages as a key element, both for voice synthesis to read in the correct language and correct accent, and for autocorrection to work properly. We all that work in international companies, we know what a mess this can be. Other accessibility features are leveraged with our trainings about accessibility standards and on how to check for accessibility issues in documents using the dedicated remanded checker. This offering within Microsoft Office supported Atos being recognized as a finalist for the 2022 Microsoft Inclusion and Changemaker Partner of the Year Award. Alexandra and our colleagues met in Paris to receive the award and to talk about continuing innovation partnership with Microsoft. This brings value and business to the table. And as a part of the offerings, we also deploy assistive technology compatible with Microsoft offerings for organizations, along with training when needed. Our policy, the holistic approach, showed with the eco-branding and the program implemented, it got awarded during the Zero project, like Christina mentioned before. We were the innovative practice and policy winner selected out of almost 400 nominations from 54 countries. Are we alone on the eco-branding efforts? Our colleague Alexandra attended the French National Advisory Council for People with Disabilities this year. It was held in the Paris Climate Academy, which is a very symbolic choice. The opening roundtable with politicians, managers of digital departments, and civil society ministries was on ecological transition or accessible digital transformation. Do we have to choose? And the answer was a clear no. Do both sustainability and accessibility. The French government provides a freely accessible online eco-responsible digital toolbox, and it also respects the dark mode preference of the user, recommending this digital mode to be used in e-governance. The French Design Gov department also provides an open source digital toolbox and guidelines to developers, service providers, and e-governance actors for accessible, inclusive, and human design for e-governance. And no surprise again, it is also available in dark mode, recommending this mode to be used in e-governance again. Still, many governmental sites are not available in an accessible, decarbonized dark mode, but this is a start. As a contrary example, we have, I'm showing a slide from the Atos GIZ and ICT for Inclusion Challenge design. The German government logos were not allowed on a dark background. So we were not allowed to use an accessible dark mode. Everything is still accessible this way, but not for everyone. Nevertheless, the topic we chose in 2022 collaboration is coherent with joining environmental protection and accessibility, which is mitigating the impact of climate change on people with disabilities in India. Talking about accessibility as a trigger for innovation, like in the ICT for Inclusion Challenge. Who of you have used a voice assistant like Alexa, Siri, or Google? You can please raise your hands using the features we have for feedback in the platform. Or just click thumbs up or something like that. So these devices are possible today thanks, among others, to Kurzweil. Kurzweil created many assistive technologies to support the blind gain access to visual information. He created the OCR to scan books into computers that could later use text-to-speech to read out loud by his reading machine for the blind. Stevie Wonder challenged him to create a machine that would mimic the sound of a grand piano, and Kurzweil won. Without blind people and Kurzweil, there would be no electronic music today. So if you see a blind people on the street, you can go and thank them. The voice synthesizer came later thanks to a lip reading contest. Many innovations have started because of a disability, as people try to overcome a barrier. When we focus on the average as designers, we create the perfect product for a limited number of people, which form the center and highest point of a bell curve. At the same time, we also create invisible barriers that would limit access for some users on the side. If we go farther to the extremes, these users could be totally excluding having no access to our product or services, or maybe a very poor, even traumatic experience. We have the typical user average in the middle, white guy, male in their 30s, university studies, wife and 2 kids at home. And in the extreme of the bell curve, we may have people with disabilities on the left and mobile and power users on the right. They both have workarounds with their technology that can spur innovative thinking, designing for the extremes, considering all the stages in between, like people getting older on the left and people under stress on the right, can create disruptive solutions for all, this time for real. These are the Microsoft inclusive personas in their permanent, temporary, and situational scenario as an example of designing for the extremes. For example, during my holiday in Thailand, I'm temporary and situational disabled because I cannot speak nor understand Thai. So I have a speech, a hearing, and a cognitive impairment. On the other side, a colleague with Down syndrome has a permanent disability. We need to reframe disability from an othering problem that affects others to understand that we are all affected and we all benefit from accessibility. Together with the UN and the World Health Organization, we chose to use the biopsychosocial model, which understands body, mind, and community as component as a part of the systems. Each of these components or domains affect each other, and it can start a circular loop. For example, if I have stress during my exams, it would trigger the psychological sector, and it would affect the biological sector, generating stomach pain, sweaty hands, headache, or dizziness. The social effects are social exclusion, like not getting an apprenticeship or getting fired because I didn't pass the exam. And I could become unmotivated and have even a depression. This would restart the loop in the psychological sector again. Next. As designers, we can also use the inclusive design principles to help us design for people with permanent, temporary, situational, or changing disabilities. The principles are quite logical and general if you think about it. We can provide a comparable experience, consider the situation, the context, be consistent, give control, offer choice, prioritize content, and add value. This might sound like a very logical and easy to achieve, but accessibility needs are easily forgotten, and it gets really messy when we have to retrofit after go live. Christina?
Yes. So, as part of our global accessibility program and our commitment to link and expand the networks that care about innovation and inclusion, last year in 2021, we launched for the first time the ICT for Inclusion Challenge, along with some amazing partners. We joined efforts with GIZ, BMZ, and the Make IT Alliance to work and promote inclusion innovation. Last year, the challenge was about inclusive education in Africa. Our ambition was to learn from people with disabilities in Africa what works for them, to use technology and support inclusion through access to education, to use disability to drive innovation and economic opportunity, and last but not least, find solutions that can really scale. Here we can see last year's banner for the ICT for Inclusion. We were amazed by the number of applications we received. We received more than 200 applications. From those, we chose 8 finalists, with their proposals varying from e-learning platforms, smartphone apps, AI solutions, to even braille devices. The first winner of the ICT for Inclusion for 2021 was Vinsite from Nigeria, with an artificial intelligence solution that helps people with visual impairment read better. For 2022, we chose a topic closer to sustainability. The theme of this year's challenge, as Beatriz already mentioned, is mitigating the impact of climate change on people with disabilities, with focus on the region of India. Additionally, this year we're happy that we have included to our support the Zero Project and India Ability Foundation. But why do we do this? Some of the reasons are that people with disabilities and elderly people are disproportionately affected by the adverse impacts of climate change. Climate change mitigation and disaster risk management measures are often not accessible or inclusive, they are exclusive. And of course, the increased climate change as well as the disaster-related risks and vulnerability. Our aim is to raise awareness on the issue of inclusive climate action and disability inclusive disaster risk reduction, identify, promote, and test innovative and digital solutions to solve this challenge, and mitigate the impact of climate change and extreme weather events on people with disabilities, and so on all people. So GIZ and Atos selected 7 teams and graded 3 of them as finalists. They all joined the Zero Project Impact Program, which is in progress. And yesterday, they all pitched their solution to the jury, which will decide the winner. And the winner will be announced on the 2nd of December during our Accessibility Innovation event to celebrate the Day of Persons with Disabilities. Moving on, Beatriz will take over and she will talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Bea?
Almost all sustainable goals affect people with disabilities. For example, 1, 2, 3, and 4, no poverty, zero hunger, good health, and quality education are issues that affect disproportionately people with disabilities around the world. This year's challenge links sustainability and disability inclusion through several UN Sustainable Development Goals, namely the 7, affordable and clean energy, 8, promoting inclusion of people with disabilities at work, 10, reduce inequalities, as people with disabilities are usually forgotten during disaster risk reduction, 11, creating accessible cities and public spaces that include people with disabilities, and 13, climate action, work with a proactive way before climate disasters occur, because people with disabilities, like I say, are forgotten and have unequal access to emergency response programs. And the 17th, of course, because we're partnering with GIZ as a private and public joint venture to achieve the goals. I'm going to give you a short overview on the legislation. The Sustainable Development Goals are also linked to the UN CPRD, the Convention of Rights of People with Disabilities. This is a graphical representation of all countries who participate in the convention in one or another way. There are only 2 or 3 countries in Africa who have not yet joined. The Convention of Rights of People with Disabilities is the base legislation, and there are other overarching laws that affect accessibility in all industries. Some affect public sector and companies that receive public money, like the Web Accessibility Directive in Europe or 508 in the US. Some are social rights and non-discrimination laws, for example, at the workplace, which affect also private companies. And likewise, there are industry-specific laws like broadcast, banking, and healthcare. All these laws are already in place. Do you and your customers know about them? We still have a bit of time to prepare for the European Accessibility Act, which I will talk in a minute. I am no lawyer, but I can still tell you that if your customers work with North America, most of South America, Europe, India, China, Taiwan, Japan, Philippines, Australia, or New Zealand, you cannot afford to ignore accessibility. The European Accessibility Act. Christina? Or I can take over, don't worry.
Yes.
I'm in a role. The European Accessibility Act affects all companies selling products or services to EU countries, no matter where they are in the world. It affects the private sector from 2025. In 2 years, Countries like Germany have already transposed this law into national law. That is the Barrierefreiheitsstärkungsgesetz and the Barrierefreiheitsstärkungsgesetz, Verordnung. Which customers should we support? Ebooks and publishing, banking, ATMs, tickets and checking kiosks, audiovisual services, TV broadcast, consumer equipment, phone telephony services and equipment, computers and OS, airbus, rail and waterborne passenger transport. That is quite a lot. And 2 years pass on and pass by very quickly. What does this mean for you? So you would ask yourself, this is very overwhelming. What can I do? So if you were already considering disability and accessibility in your processes, well done. Keep up the good work. Nothing is going to change. If all this was new to you, don't you worry. You can start with baby steps. You can add, for example, alt text, alternative descriptions, Bildbeschreibung to your images, or you can use the Microsoft Accessibility Checker. As a team, you need to plan for accessibility. You can learn about accessibility and disability etiquette. You can check the legislation and standards, like, for example, WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. You can integrate accessibility in your workflows, like this example of Scrum that I'm showing on the right. And you can integrate, and don't be overwhelmed. Of course, you integrate it in your process and your workflows. And the next thing is not be overwhelmed. We value progress over perfection. As a designer, you can learn about inclusive design. You can research and do usability tests with people with disabilities, include them in your co-creation processes. You can annotate your designs for keyboard navigation, for example. You can think about alternative ways to communicate visual and sound content. And you can include accessibility and inclusion during UX writing. In the workshop that we're giving later, we'll share some more baby steps and things you can include today with some checklist for you to take away.